In this episode of Innovation Deciphered, joined by Scott Lenik. He's the CEO of Neverbland, who I've known for some time now. I've always been very interested in his views on innovation, and particularly about how this applies to society and businesses in general. So in this episode, Scott focuses a lot on the holistic nature of innovation and how can that be exploited for good value. So I hope you'll enjoy the episode and welcome for any feedback in the future. Okay, Scott. Well, look, obviously interesting times. The economy has taken a bit of a dive. Certainly, there are a number of companies now that are starting to look at laying off people, and indeed, many people have been laid off. Unfortunately, money supply is tighter, and in many instances, that's been a real driver of innovation. But of course, it's also been a bit of an encumbrance because the people that want to do it are suddenly now disenfranchised or don't have the wherewithal to do it. What's your reading of the current circumstances? We've been there before, of course, but what's your reading of it and what do you see as the way out?
In terms of the way out, I wish I had a crystal ball. But certainly in terms of the reading, I guess what's quite different is we seem to have had kind of a issue with obviously inflation, and a lot of these have been kind of driven by external factors. So the war in Ukraine, and has kind of primarily led to the energy crisis, having big impact on cost of living. Obviously primarily kind of for heating, we're really feeling it over winter, and sort of massive increases in food pricing as well. And then also kind of I think what's kind of quite different for a lot of this inflation is that it's kind of supply side driven rather than demand side driven, which makes it kind of quite difficult to kind of find an easy solution from. We've got things that we need, and we just have to pay up until a point at which you can literally no longer afford. Thankfully, there are still large numbers of people who can afford, but it's painful. But I think what is most concerning in this country, at least, is that we're seeing increasingly large numbers of people who are going through real hardship to try and get through kind of the times at the moment. And I think from a business perspective, it just leads to kind of large amounts of uncertainty. I mean, obviously, depending on what category you're in, but if you're in something that is largely kind of driven by kind of consumer spending, and let's say kind of fashion or going out, kind of entertainment, or kind of a lot of these industries, literally if their kind of core customer base, certainly at kind of a mainstream and potentially kind of lower income bracket segment of the population, they just don't have the money to be able to spend. So if you're a kind of local pub, and you are, in most instances, going to be choosing kind of food and heating over going out for a couple of pints, 2-3 times a week. It's kind of the impact that it has on those businesses. And I think everybody's just looking for an element of confidence, an anchor point in the future to go, okay, if I know what things are going to be like, then I can start planning from a business perspective. And as you said, when people are kind of faced with real challenges, you kind of, I think humans' kind of natural inclination is to want to try and improve things, make their lives more efficient, better organized, and that could be a kind of huge driver for innovation.
It's interesting because having gone through the pandemic recently, there was a lot of talk about resilience, both personal resilience, and I think a lot of people started to recognise the importance of their own well-being if they hadn't done previously, but also the resilience of businesses. And a lot of businesses did really well in transitioning, so they were able to survive, and indeed some of them did thrive. But this has come on so quickly thereafter, it's put a further test on that resilience. But I wonder to what extent that is a form of correction that says, right, well, a lot of people have sort of been getting away with it with cheap money or papering over cracks, as opposed to doing it in a truly systemic way. And certainly from our perspective, and the reason why we were very pleased to get the Kite Mark was it was bringing some form of structure to how you innovate and how you innovate towards a more sustainable future. Have you seen evidence of that in your own career? And are you seeing any emerging evidence that people are recognising that and are now really taking innovation seriously to look at how they can be much more competitive in a harder market?
Yeah, I mean, when you kind of ask that question, I kind of think about two different types of businesses. Most of my experience for the last 15 years at least has been in service-oriented businesses, and obviously in service-oriented businesses, then your kind of primary asset is your people,
Of course.
and therefore driving kind of resilience at a personal level becomes super important. That human capital is the basis of your innovation, it's the basis of your value, and therefore helping to kind of understand people so that they're better able to perform as part of a team, and they feel more comfortable in their work and personal life becomes something that I think is really important. And what we saw over the pandemic was, I guess, increased focus around things like mental health, just around kind of well-being and healthcare in general. And I certainly see that there's been, and again, I'm speaking from a perspective of a primarily SME rather than kind of big business, is to really take that conversation seriously, and to kind of really start by going, actually, what is going to enable us to perform well, collectively as a group of people, acknowledging that people have lives outside of work, whilst also acknowledging that it's important that people feel fulfilled in what they're doing. And so I think all of those that combination of, I think, building resilience is another kind of facet of becoming high performing, as an individual and as a part of a team, and then also in terms of that kind of personal well-being as well. I mean, we as a company, again, we're not a huge company, but I've invested a lot in supporting kind of mental health. We have an association with kind of mental health charity, and spend time each year as a group going out. We go out on a long walk, and there are people that we can, it's almost like an assisted walk where you're speaking to people, and individuals have an opportunity on a one-on-one basis to speak to people. And then there's kind of, private offline conversations that people are able to have as well. But you also just see kind of, a growth in people recognizing that, it's okay to have challenges from time to time. And I think it's a real positive that people now are a lot more open to talking therapies in general, whether or not that's kind of with expert specialist practitioners, or just kind of, using the help of tools and apps that are on the internet that you can download and engage with. Yeah. But there's just kind of a lot more resources now to be able to support people, and I certainly think that it's just having open, honest conversations. When I first started my career, it was still that kind of very, you had this kind of linear idea of how life would evolve, and it was always kind of positive, and culminating in a happy retirement, somewhere warm by the sea. But obviously the world has changed, a huge amount.
I don't think it was ever really that anyway, but you're right.
Exactly. And so I just think it's now people are just having a lot more kind of honest, open conversations about every aspect of their life, and I think that just helps us to, get to know each other better, and I think the result of that is just better well-being. And I think people are kind of seeing well-being now as not just, how big your house is, the car that you drive, where you go on holiday. I think it's much broader, and I think actually the workplace is much more positive.
But that's a really important point you've focused on, is the human capital side of that. And there has been rightly a correction, in my opinion, and I agree with you that there has been a correction on that to address that. But at the end of the day, from a business sense, you come back to the so what. Clearly, from a human sense, we want to be well and we want to be happy and we want to be fulfilled. But from a business sense, you've then got to convert that into something that creates a sustainable future for the business and for the people within it. And I'm just interested in your experience as to whether people are looking at it sufficiently holistically, or whether they're biting off a chunk that they can deal with, the human capital, and then worry about, well, where's the business going? And then when the business is right, worrying about what impact that's having on society. And is there enough collective, holistic view as to how we're addressing that, in your opinion?
I mean, I think it comes down to at a leadership level, really. I mean, I think I'm a strong advocate of looking at that kind of holistically, because, there are, if you look at staff turnover, for example, there's a significant cost to a business of that, not just in terms of that person going and potential recruitment costs, but it's also the time that people had invested in understanding your culture, understanding your business processes, and kind of maintaining and being aligned with your values. So if you can kind of spend more time focusing on human capital, and as a result you can reduce staff turnover, you can reduce days sick, you can help people to achieve their potential. These are all things that are feeding back into the business. Now, it's not just kind of like nicey, we're just going to, spend lots of money training people, having away days, getting people to get to know each other better. We live in a commercial environment. But I genuinely believe that these things, when structured properly and when done with a clear understanding of kind of your a business context and what you're trying to achieve, and why these things are beneficial, then I think these things do the investment in time and in cash will pay for itself.
Yeah, and I mean, you touched on apps there. I mean, there's been such a rise of the use of technology to enable and facilitate innovation and be innovative in themselves. But do you find that people are almost relying too much on technology to drive innovation, rather than thinking about, as you say, the human capital, the generation of ideas, and thinking about what we're trying to achieve, and then fitting in digital where appropriate, as opposed to digital first?
I don't know. I mean, I think I'm obviously slightly biased,
Sure.
In that, just in terms of the space that I work. But I think people have always looked to try and kind of leverage the world around them and leverage technology in a way that will help to kind of accelerate what they're able to achieve on their own and drive efficiency.
Yeah.
I mean, from the wheel to the horse to the motor engine, and all I just see that like technology is just kind of another phase of industrialization, and it's helping us to drive even more efficiencies than we're potentially able to achieve on an individual level with what you might call more kind of traditional engineering and manufacturing. If you just think about the mobile phone, I mean, the power that you have for kind of dealing with almost every aspect of your life more efficiently is enormous. And I mean, again, we were both remember what it was like to live without one.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I just kind of think back to, there was no such thing as online shopping. There was no such thing as online banking. There was like all of the things that you can do now that you can get an instant response from that you would have either had to take a trip down into the centre of town or your kind of like local shopping centre, or put something in the mail and like, wait, a week or so to get a response. So I think it's using appropriate technologies to drive innovation. Again, that point you said about, I do think that it's difficult to just look at the two in isolation. I mean, you could argue now that with growth in AI, that in theory technology is able to drive innovation, independently. But by and large, it's about that relationship and that interplay between kind of, human capital and technology in a way that can accelerate innovation.
And certainly I know your role is to try and bridge that gap between human and technology, but certainly a number of our clients have been dissuaded through lack of real understanding of the capability of technology and the inaccessibility of talent to assist them in that. And even if they can access that talent, it's so expensive. And therefore there are opportunities that are being missed through lack of talent and or finance. Then you've got people with loads of talent, loads of finance that are being expended on maybe the wrong ideas. So what's the answer to actually matching the idea with the right technology and vice versa?
Well, there's a definite process to being able to do that. We don't just kind of sit in the room and have a kind of hope for our eureka moments as to how this happens. But, we start very much by, trying to get insight, and insight really is about people and processes. And it's actually, might sound counterintuitive to what we do, but you start very much at an analog level. It's kind of working out, well, what are current processes? And are there any pain points in those processes, or are there any parts of which those processes could be made more efficient? And then this does require having an understanding of the technical landscape. It's like, what technologies are going to be most appropriate to be able to drive efficiencies at each stage of that kind of process mapping. And then looking at that from a commercial perspective and kind of working out actually, where there's going to be a real return on investment to drive innovation. And again, it's that, whenever we talk to people, have these kind of three areas, and you're trying to get the sweet spot of this kind of like Venn diagram between, what a consumer need is and the added value for the user, a business need and where that kind of opportunity is for the business. And then, like, as importantly, what resources are available to make that happen. And that will determine sometimes choice of technology. It will determine how you execute, whether or not you can come to a consultant or like ourselves, or whether or not you need to try and hire and do something internally. So it will kind of also depend again on time pressures, your competitive environment, whether or not you're a market leader or whether or not you're having to play catch up. So there's kind of all sorts of different factors at play. But if you take a kind of logical, methodical approach to it, it's what we found is consistently the best way to drive results.
Right, to drive results in itself, or to drive long-term results. So what I mean by that is, you can have an idea, take it through your process, it succeeds or otherwise. Or are we talking about ideas that actually are adding value to your business and your customer's business that are just exponentially growing?
I mean, it's both, and it depends on the circumstances and the opportunity. I mean, obviously, not every innovation is going to have the impact that Google search engines had, for example. But I think it's understanding, what problem you're trying to solve and why, trying to get a sense of what the potential is within that. And sometimes, you're embarking on a journey, you don't know where it's going to go, because you look now at a lot of things that you hear about, potential for AI or potential for some kind of biotech innovation, or a lot of people are, and this is what futurists are doing largely, are kind of projecting on what may be possible in the future based on what we know at the moment. So I think quantum computing is a great example of that. Quantum computing is still very much in its infancy in terms of what you're able to deliver, because it's just the temperatures at which it needs to operate at. It's incredibly impractical. But if you take the concept and you push it forward like 15, 20 or more years, based on what we know the factors are, if we can drive efficiencies, improve it, then you can then look forward and go, well, actually, this is the potential of this technology, down the line. Yeah. And it's a similar kind of thing.
Yeah. Because I think what I've noticed in the micro level in our own business and with our clients and broader, there's a completely different skill set about generating ideas that are capable of leading to value in the long term, and exploiting good ideas and taking them through the process and getting the necessary, be it technology or skills, aligned to make it a success. And it starts to become quite complex as to how we go through that. And certainly from our perspective, we recognised if we're going to have any chance to exploit it and help our customers exploit it, it has got to be more system-led, which then conversely can sometimes turn the ideas people off, because suddenly, well, what's the bloody point? Because I've got to go through all these hoops, and by the time I've done that, we've missed the chance. How, in your experience, do you keep people on board and aligned to see that you do need creativity and ideas, but you do need some sort of structure and process to ensure they're properly exploited?
Again, this kind of comes back to the resources point that we talked about before. So you've kind of got, when you're driving innovation using technology in that way, you're either going, we think that there's potential in this space and we're prepared to invest in the long term because we feel that by investing in the long term, we will be...
Can I interrupt?
Yeah.
But when you say we feel, what is the metric that you need to apply to that to confirm or otherwise that you should continue?
Yeah. Well, I guess using the kind of AI analogy is quite interesting there. It's kind of having a sufficient understanding of the potential for that technology, applying almost like a what if type statement to your business, and just, I guess, kind of postulating what that could mean in the future, and then almost doing a cost benefit analysis. So there's almost like this kind of potential, what ifs could at one level, but then at another level, if you have to be much more kind of immediate in your return, then you have to take an approach of going like, what are we able to do based on technologies that are available today? So that's primarily the space that we operate in, because primarily we're helping people with ideas who want to bring something to market over a shortish period of time. Typically no more than a year, having kind of a first launch. And you can only do that by harnessing technologies that are currently available, that you know and have complete confidence you're going to be able to deliver a solution. But what you find, the market leaders are taking a longer term bet. They've got deeper pockets. They're effectively building their whole kind of R&D kind of labs and departments within their organizations. And they're testing things, testing potential market opportunities, looking for acquisition in a space where they can potentially kind of accelerate their development in a space. But they don't have a 100% clear date where they need to have a commercial application, commercial return. It's investing an amount of their profits in that space, just with a view that there will be a there's going to be value in doing that. And obviously there are certain like tax incentives around that as well,
Yeah.
which makes it kind of more attractive to invest in that space.
Yeah, as we well know. And I suppose what you're just confirming is, like any big decision you make, either as a person or as a business, there's so much evidence and science you can get to back it up, but ultimately you've got to have a degree of instinct as well, and then back that instinct and follow it through and make sure you've got break points that you can withdraw if it's not going as planned. And another thing that struck me as you were talking there is, we talk about innovation very much about the value we can get from it, and we look at it in the positive sense. But of course, innovation sometimes is the cost of not doing something. If you don't change, then you might be dead in the water anyway. So sometimes it becomes a risk mitigation or just a survival instinct that you've got to come up with that change. And that's not always, in my experience, that's not something that is always considered as innovation. It's considered survival or a must do, as opposed to something that is every bit as important and as innovative as some of the successful stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't seem to be the mindset. Or
yeah, I mean, I think, you know, if you take a big kind of like macro view, there's certain areas where we 100% need to drive innovation. If you look at our demographics, we are becoming, you know, older.
Yeah.
Different parts of the world, primarily our more advanced economies are becoming older. The proportion of kind of working age population as a percentage of the overall population is projected to decrease. So unless we're driving kind of, you know, innovation, whether or not it's through kind of computing or robotics or other areas of manufacturing, you know, standard of living is going to decrease because you can't, you know, without that improved efficiency, then there's going to be fewer people having to provide, you know, a high proportion of GDP, and it's, you know, that becomes an imperative.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. So maybe just to start bringing this to a conclusion then, 2 questions. What is the innovation that you've had some involvement in, either in a personal or business capacity, that you are most proud of, and you may not be able to be explicit about it, but it'd be great if you could. And then secondly, what is the innovation you would love to be involved in?
very good questions. And it's very difficult to, I guess it's almost like saying, you know, which of your children do you love the most? It's, you know, I'm proud of all of the things that, you know, I've worked on. I mean, I guess the things that I feel kind of most proud of are things that have impacted on people's well-being, and most of the things that we work on, you know, are out by design, don't just have a kind of purely, you know, commercial benefit. Hopefully they have a human benefit as well. So we've worked on projects in mental health and helping kind of organisation or particular organisation be able to kind of offer its services to far greater numbers of people, to a kind of deeper, kind of richer level, do that globally, kind of through technology. And so you kind of know that the impact that is having is kind of really significant, you know, and life-changing, and in some instances probably, you know, preventing people from you know, taking really drastic steps. Helping any technology that can help people to make better choices. You know, I think we're all. I was reading an article kind of this morning about kind of the environment and how, an individual level, everybody cares about ecology. Yeah. Everybody, you know, everybody wants to preserve this kind of amazing planet that we live on. But then it's not always easy to be able to kind of make those kind of lifestyle changes. Sometimes we don't know what to do. And so if you can do something that kind of, if you can help to develop and scale technologies that enable people to make technologies that are having a positive impact on the planet, but whilst not having to lead to a dramatic change in their lifestyle, then I think those things are really positive.
And I know a lot of people are looking at that. There's a lot of money headed that way, but it's of course making sure that's done in a coordinated way, and you're not competing, you're actually collaborating to come up with the best answers, because it's so damn serious, isn't it?
No, 100%. I mean, there's a lot of innovation in the kind of fashion space, and kind of move against kind of fast fashion, and how do we kind of, drive value around maybe kind of reusing, repairing, recycling, in a way that, you can deliver commercial value from it as well, but at the same time, there's a lot of kind of, end user value there as well.
And finally, Scott, if there are people watching or listening to this that have got ideas but don't know how to exploit them, or have got talent and or cash that want to back good ideas, what would be your advice to them?
Well, I think you're in a great place if you're in the UK. I mean, the UK is actually, I think, one of the best places in the world to be. The number of kind of incubators and accelerators, and we're kind of second only to the US in terms of investment into startups. I mean, I think there's still quite a long way to go still with encouraging and investing behind more kind of female founders, and from founders from different kind of ethnic minorities, and kind of more kind of racial and gender diversity. There's definitely more to be done there. But as I said, there are lots of resources online. I mean, I'm happy to talk to people, as well. But
with your agreement, we'll make sure your contact details are available. And that was the important point, as well as everything you've said. There are companies like ours and companies like yours that are always open to help, and where appropriate. And if we can't help, point people in the right direction. So.
Exactly. And I think that's kind of one of the things that this space is great, is that yes, there is a kind of commercial imperative for everybody, but the thing I've really loved about being involved in the kind of startup community is that there is a genuine desire for people to look at the bigger picture and go, actually, by collaboration, we're actually growing the pie, rather than going, there's a pie here and I want to have an increasing share of it.
Well, look, we could talk all day, Scott, as we said at the outset, but I think you've touched on some really important points. I know it'll be of interest to people that are watching and listening, and as I said, with your agreement, we'll make sure that your contact details are available, so that the conversation can continue, not just between you and I, but you, me, and others. So thanks very much for your time. Really appreciate you coming in.
Thanks very much, Brendan. It's been a pleasure.
Good.